We just got word, it's just been announced by the royal family that Queen Elizabeth has died at Balmoral just this afternoon. Welcome back to the program. Dana Loesch here with you this Thursday at the bottom of our second hour, and the news is out that the Queen Elizabeth II has died peacefully, they said, at Balmoral this afternoon. And they, I guess, like her kids and grandkids have been there. They raced, apparently it was reported that they raced there. Now, I know it's kind of weird for Americans to follow this sort of thing. It's going to be all over UK and Commonwealth nations. But I do think it is somewhat interesting you do have to note, I think, the historical relevancy of this. She's been there since World War II. I mean, she served as a mechanic during World War II. She never seemed woke either, I must add. Now, I don't know if I can say that necessarily the same for her son, but she never seemed woke. And there's photos of her even, in her later years, firing 50 cal and doing all this stuff. And she supported hunting and the outdoors. She apparently loved the outdoors. She was a dog lover, which, that speaks to me too. That and being outdoors and, ethical harvesting of meat, that's, all speaks to me. So it is, I think that's important to note in all of this. And I think that's where, especially since America is being roiled with wokery and a breakdown of norms and traditions and everything else, I think it's very important to note that she may be the last anti-woke monarch. Whether or not you follow the monarchy, I think that's something important to acknowledge. She was not woke. And that there's a number of ways I think that's been, whether or not that's something that's analyzed by the British media, I doubt. But the news just came in. Queen Elizabeth is dead. She's died at age 96. Now, they have a whole thing that they go through. And I wanted to... I'm going to pull this up because I can't remember what it's called. They have a whole thing that they go through. It's called Operation London Bridge. Now, this is what's going to happen. They have a whole thing about it. And they've rehearsed this and they've practiced this for years. It was an all-hands-on-deck protocol that was established in the 60s. A couple of people have this. The Guardian has a detailed thing. And also New York Post and Politico. So what happens, London Bridge is down. That's the plan for what happens. That's always, they wanted to be seamless. I mean, she's outlasted, 12 U.S. presidents? How many prime ministers? She met Churchill, for crying out loud. She was supposed to host what they call the Privy Council. She did meet the new prime minister, Liz Truss, yesterday. And I guess that was day before, a couple of days ago. It was the last photo of her. At least that was released publicly. So what ends up happening, the Queen's private secretary leads with the news, and they contact the prime minister, and then those are the people who are told first. This is literally how this happens. The private secretary contacts the prime minister. And the last time a British monarch died, her father, King George, 65 years ago, they say Hyde Park Corner to Buckingham Palace because they don't want people who are connected. They didn't want switchboard operators to find out. And so she's known as London Bridge. So the civil servants on secure lines, they say London Bridge is down. And from the Foreign Office's Global Response Center, the news goes out to 15 governments outside the UK where she's had to stay. And the other 36 nations of the Commonwealth, because you have England, you have Great Britain, you have the Commonwealth. There's different names for the number of countries that are included in those named references. And so usually the way it is, because they notify prime ministers and all this stuff. So she will have passed for a little bit before it's made public. So it's not an immediate, they wear black armbands and all this, and they have a plan that they have rehearsed. Like when they said when her husband passed away, he planned his whole thing apparently himself, and that was all rehearsed and all of that. So it goes out to the press, and then they they go from there. That's Operation London Bridge. And they do this to have everybody alerted publicly at the same time. And they have everything's, the funeral, the day of national mourning. They said that the day following her death is D+1 until her funeral 10 days out. So it'll be 10 days before her funeral. And then that's declared the day of national mourning. And then it'll be and then they have, I guess at some point later on, they'll have her son crowned and he'll deliver a national broadcast. So on D-Day +1, they're going to have the Accession Council meet at St. James Palace. They will officially proclaim him as the new sovereign according to the leaked plans. And that's how everybody knows of all this, by the way. And then they said that he will meet with the prime minister and senior cabinet officials and all of this. There are a number of reasons why yes, we're American. We don't have a monarch, but you need to watch things because certain optics do affect, they do have an effect. We're getting ready for winter. We're starting fall. We're watching a serious energy crisis about to envelop Europe. There's a lot of weakness everywhere. We have weak people who elect weak politicians who make weak policies and have disastrous effects on their populace. Weakness allows tyrants to flourish. It allows evil in the hearts of men to grow, as we've seen with Russia and in China, Belarus. And I think that this has a major effect because for that nation, we've always known, we've always kind of watched it from afar across the pond, But for that nation, they've had her there for, their great-grandparents. She's been on the throne. She was on the throne in her 20s. Can you imagine anybody in their 20s doing, today's, no offense, Steve, or Juan. You guys are different. But you know what I mean? We get people who get upset over pancake mix for crying out loud, right? That's what makes me also think that there's no way there would be a civil war. You can't have people who get upset over civil war. They're not going to be able to have the wherewithal to stop and charge their cars every 20 minutes on their way to a civil war. Not going to happen. But I look at this a lot for so many people. I have friends who are British. She's been there forever. And they have always talked about there being some kind of like a guiding presence there during the days of World War II when her father famously, they could have fled to the countryside. Her father stayed there. They were bombing London and her dad stayed there with the prime minister. They, were in a little bit more secure locations, but he made sure that he was very visible. And that's something that's stuck in their heads. I've had my friends tell me about this. They're like, they've never left. Like whenever it got bad, they never left. And so when you've grown up with that, it's a very different culture. When you've grown up with that, when your grandparents grew up with it, when your parents grew up with it, you grew up with it, it is a big thing in terms of representation, how it's an iconic thing for that culture. It does have an effect. I don't think that it can be denied the effect it has, like on a nation's emotions, their psyche, things of that nature. So that's why I think it's important to touch on it, because it's just out of all the times I had one of my friends who's British was telling me that he hoped that he wasn't a fan of Charles. And he was like, I hope the Queen lives on for another 90 something years. Just formidable. 72 years, I think, on the throne. So I think that's why it's important to acknowledge this stuff. They said she's going to lie in state for 3 days. After a procession through London, it'll take her coffin to Buckingham Palace and then to the Palace of Westminster. They'll have a service there, and then it'll be in state for 3 days. And it'll be open to the public 23 hours a day if that plan hasn't changed. And apparently they've had this, I think they rehearse this stuff almost annually. And then they carry it up to the St. Giles's Cathedral and all this stuff. And then it's 60 years of planning. Operation London Bridge is what it's called. So that's been kicked into effect. And I guess today is officially D1. So it'll go for 10 days. And then from there. Very interesting how this and what effect this is going. I mean, think about it like this. This is what I mean when you have optics like this. When her dad stayed in London when they were bombing, that and Churchill, his speech and their insistence to be seen working, and she working as a mechanic and making sure that she was seen doing these things. You know what that does for people who are looking for hope? Because there for a while it was very sketchy. They were standing alone for a while. And if they would have fallen, what would have happened? And people dug in. They got that stiff upper lip. Keep calm and carry on wasn't, I think, a statement of surrender. It was a statement of, yeah, well, I'm too resolute for your thuggery to affect me. And they kept doing what needed to be done in order to be successful in protecting their sovereignty. People get hope from things like that, so you can't discount it. You can't discount it. Like people get, when the politicians here in the United States, right? Think about with Kavanaugh for a moment, Brett Kavanaugh. When he was seen fighting against the smears, what did that do to a nation's attitude in pushing back against that? So as much as we think it is far removed from us, and it is because it's, we're not a monarchy, we're a republic. There's certain ways in which it does touch, no man's an island. It does touch, I think, the psyche and the overall attitude. And that is the perspective through which I look at this. I don't look at this as, this is a monarch that we ran away from. I don't look at that and through that perspective. I look at it as, what is this going to mean for the attitude of the British people who are about to find themselves in another difficult position again? The energy crisis. They got a new prime minister. Those are always the shakier days of new governments, right? That's why transitions, that's why we pride ourselves on seamless, peaceful transitions, because it is an establishment of, supposed to be of trust. And it's always, it's always a little sketchy as everybody settles in. They got a brand new prime minister. We're dealing with a new cabinet. You have an energy crisis on your doorstep. You have a war not far away. And we are dealing with the worldwide onslaught of it's Marxism wearing the mask of green energy. What will this do to the British people? I think that's a fair question.